There is no one way to priestess. In this modern world, the professional priestess isn't just reclaiming her power, she's owning her right to be seen, supported, and supremely resourced. Money, visibility, the team, devotion, she gets to have it all. Because her work is the work, and the world is catching up, learning that your presence is absolutely priceless. Because when she thrives, the medicine multiplies. I'm your host, Lindsay Schroeder, and I'll be connecting you with the sacred alchemists at the forefront of the feminine revolution. The modern priestess, she's building her empire through her essence. This is the space for those ready to return to the temple, the one that lives deep within. Today on the Professional Priestess podcast, we are going full Mary Magdalene, full Magdalena. We are tapping into one of the most beautiful and sacred, and I feel not spoken about topics as it pertains to priestess work and to just being at the forefront of this feminine awakening and feminine revolution. And today I have a beautiful guest with me to deep dive into topics that both of us can probably talk nonstop for an entire 24 hours or maybe longer about. Olivia, welcome to the Professional Priestess podcast. I am beaming.
Thank you, Lindsay. The feeling is so mutual. I am so excited to be here.
Let's just get right into it. I would love to hear a little bit about your experience, your journey, and how you came to the term, came to the self-identification, came to the initiation of priestess. Because as a fellow priestess, we don't get the opportunity to a lot of times be initiated through our own lineage, to be a 6-year-old little being and start having our gifts develop and have, someone in our community or tribe go, she should go over here and she should learn this and she should be brought up in this. And I have found that so many of us were so isolated in this experience, and yet without any continuity, we have such continuity. And to be able to share those stories and let other people hear that and just truly give another avenue that feels so deeply in alignment for so many of us, I'd love to get started by just kind of hearing your priestess origin story. Give us the lore.
I love it. I love a good lore drop. I was raised Catholic. I was raised and within the Catholic Church, and I was always encouraged to think independently through that. My mom was always very much like, part of the reason why I was raised in a lot of Catholicism was because my dad was in the military and we moved around a lot. So a lot of the schools that they sent me to, they were like, well, the Catholic school is like the best school to send her to. So like, this is the school that she's going to go to. And so within that, I found this duality of feeling like so drawn to like the altar and to like the saints, especially like Joan of Arc. She just always really fascinated me. And I always felt something. And
Yeah.
I always felt very just drawn to also just like the altar space and watching and felt so alive in so much of it. And it was like as I got older and developed a consciousness, did I start to realize that I would be looking at that altar, but I would never be the one stewarding that altar, right? I
Yeah.
would never be the one standing behind the pulpit. If I was, I would be reading from a book. I'd be reading a bit of the gospel, and then I would go and I would sit down and listen to whatever the priest had to say.
Yeah.
And so I then, we moved again, and I was in public schools and I was in art. I was a dancer and I was doing more artistic work. And just as I sort of stepped into my own young adulthood as a young woman, I just couldn't reconcile what I knew to be true in my heart with what I was hearing in church, and what so much of what the Catholic Church was pushing forward in terms of like choice and in terms of queerness and some of these other pieces, as well as never seeing anyone that was of my gender
Yeah.
standing and preaching, right? And so I around like my college time realized that Catholicism wasn't for me.
Yeah.
And it began this sort of like 5-year journey that I didn't sort of realize was a 5-year journey at the time, of just like grasping for that feeling again. Like that feeling of what I now understand to be like gnosis, of a knowing of God, of love, of the spiritual connection in other ways, but I didn't know where to go. I didn't know where to find it. I would still go and just like sit in churches when they were empty and just like stare at the statues of Mary and be like, well, I felt something. Like, where did that go? And it
Mhm.
was very dark night of the soul in many ways, because it was just this like uprooting. I was realizing my own sexual identity, my own queerness. I was going through a lot of trauma in relationships. And I just was like going through what I now understand to be all these different initiations
Yeah.
that then led me to teachers like Marianne Williamson and Gabby Bernstein, who were these like windows into a spirituality that was rooted in personal authority, that was rooted in ultimately an understanding of God through our lived experiences. And then I was like walking, I just have this vivid memory. I was living in New York City working at this ad tech job, and I downloaded this book about Mary Magdalene because I was like, oh, I always liked her. Like, I
Yeah.
wonder what this book is about. And it was Mary Magdalene Revealed by Megan Watterson, which I will say is forever the book that changed the course of my life. I had to stop listening to it while I was working because I was getting so heated, and like I felt like I was on fire. Like I was
Yeah.
like, "Wait, what?" And it worked out that she had recently published the book and happened to be giving a talk in Brooklyn about the book, and it was like the night, it was one of those crazy
Oh
things.
my
I like
god.
looked it up, was that night. It was 10 minutes away from where I was. I was like, "Well, I have to go." And
Yeah.
I just remember sitting in this, like, rage and being like, "I'm so angry." And all these other women around me, we were like, "We're so angry." And she was like, "Yeah." And it that to me was really the awakening of a deeper understanding of, like, what this was. And I remember reading about Mary Magdalene as a priestess and as a priestess of Isis, of Aset, and, like, understanding this this name of what I was, and I was like, "Oh, it's I think that feels like this call." And then I stumbled on, it's just like all these things that I now know are just like divinely being like redirected towards us, right? Like it's like the universe is like a GPS. And when we're like going one direction, they'll be like, "Okay, well, like how do we intersect with her to like get the information in front of her so that she'll understand what this is?" And I stumbled on and now a dear friend who was doing a Magdalene priestess initiation, and from the moment I saw those 2 words together, I was like,
Yeah.
"That is it.
Yes.
That is me. That is what I am." And that was about 6 years ago. So it's been this also, like, this stepping into like, the lore is so interesting, right? Because, like, I also never planned to be super public about this. Like I didn't like intentionally start making content about Mary Magdalene. It was like her feast day a couple years ago, and I like got home from a workout and I just threw my phone up and I like riffed for like a minute, and it just is like I've never looked back. It's just been this like
Yeah.
clear part of the calling. And I mean the priestess work is so duality, like inherently dualistic, right? I'm like guardian of the unconscious, the uprooter of the secret, hidden, veiled truths. And I'm also like on a podcast with you talking about this because like we need to be talking about it because
Yeah.
the name and the naming and the claiming of, because the opposite of a priest is a priestess. Like that's the match of the two. Like, so I was walking around following all these priests, had never heard of a priestess. And most people within organized religion will be like, there's no such thing as that. And I was like, well, it's something we are. It's not just something that we do. It's something that we are. So that's my TED talk on the priestess lore.
We gotta go further into that because I think the who we are, what we are is really important in this conversation because prior to with other jobs, with other callings, it's important to separate those two things. Where like that was always something that I was like focused on learning as I was growing up. I didn't want to become the job that I was doing, and I was so adamant about it. Whether that was a lawyer, a doctor, an accountant, a teacher, a vet, whatever it was, I was so focused on going, but that's not like who I am. It's what I do. And then this relationship with priestesshood of like, this is what I am in addition to what I'm doing. And so I would love to put some language to something that we like can't really language, but to help kind of like highlight some edges for the plethora of individuals that are going to hear and feel this, be that someone who, like the two of us, is in this deep knowing without anything to grasp onto. And let's give them some like handholds to go, like, if this is you, like, grip here, and then let the universal GPS take you like it took us. And then others who are listening to this with that peak of interest, those like soulmate clients, those soulmate contracts that we have that are like truly meant to be seen and held and supported by a priestess in the modern age. I would love to get deeper into that weaving of what I do and who I am. What do those two things mean to you, and where are you in that process? Because it's a forever process when it's the thing that you are.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's so many profound like nuances in everything you just highlighted. So thank you so much for that, because I think um it's complex, and that's the beauty of it, that it gets to be nuanced and it gets to be this ever evolving journey. And when we're existing outside of the confines of doctrine and dogma, it can sometimes feel like, well, wait, so what are the rules, and like what am I supposed to do, and how do I know? And for those of us who also want to be in integrity, we're also like, okay, well, how am I also making sure that I'm not like tumbling down an alt-right pipeline while I'm pursuing my priestess work, right? Like there are these deep questions that are so important. So thank you for bringing that forward. And I think, one of my big pieces for the general sweep of it is like, if you have to ask, if you are sitting here listening to this podcast, you are a priestess. It is in you. It's there, because people who don't feel this call don't ask.
Yeah,
And the name
yeah.
priestess might feel fun, like you might identify ultimately more with mystic or with magician or with some other variant. However, one thing that I learned in terms of those pieces to grasp onto, as like, you're like scaling the wall and you're like, how do I know which rock is the one that's
Mhm.
going to hold me? Is it's the teachers that you're drawn to, because it is a lineage. There
Yes.
is this passing down of wisdom, and it's not a lineage that's like, oh, I have information you don't have, which means I'm elevated over you. It's, I've been walking down this path in a specific way, and I have this flashlight. So let me help you navigate your own way, because the rock that worked for me, you might actually need the rock to the right, because our bodies are different and our physiology is different and our epigenetic and cultural memories are different. But it's like when you're gravitating towards books and teachers and podcasts of these more spiritual leaning topics and priestess specific topics, it's because there's something in you that's recognizing, it's remembering, and
Yeah.
it's also asking us to be in the body. And when we're thinking about, there's this Audre Lorde quote that I always come back to when I think about this. It's um the white fathers say, I think, therefore I am. The black mother within us, the poet, whispers, I feel, therefore I can be free.
Mm.
And this is this line that we're walking. I think, therefore I am. I feel, therefore I can be free. So if you're looking for these pieces to hold on to, the fact that you're compelled is the answer. And the becoming is in the remembering. You're not here to become some other version of yourself that floats on a cloud and like shits rainbows. And it's just like, I'm so untouchable. I'm just a priestess. It's like, no, priestesses are on the earth. We are here, we are grounded, we are deeply human and wildly imperfect. And our work is to get into that knowing all the more fully.
What a piece that each of us has such a complicated experience with. I feel like the up and out is so easy for us. It's so natural. Is like when I first really like looked into numbing and disassociation and all of that, like especially talking about the nervous system. And I was like, oh well, I don't do that. Like I'm feeling so good about that. Well, I don't do that and I don't do that. I'm feeling like so good about it. And then realizing on the priestess path, it looks different. My 3 hours of meditation sometimes is the same thing as someone else numbing out with TV for 3 hours. And I'm like, oh, sometimes my up and out is escapism. Sometimes the getting into the body, the being the human on planet Earth in this human form, transmitting and translating and like really like getting into the muck of reality is what I am avoiding. And it can be these beautiful tools and things that like, I'm not saying meditation is bad or wrong. I'm not saying that I don't
Yeah.
love my 3 hour meditations, but it did take a very deep self-reflection and a walking of that path consistently and a like constantly coming back to go, well, my work might look a little bit different. And I might have to, like you're saying, hold myself. What are these rules? And yet there are no rules, but like, how do I in integrity navigate that when it's a lot of times just me and my connection, where we don't necessarily have, a unified doctrine that we each get when, the goddess comes down and dubs us and is like, okay, you are, here's your manual, here's what you do. We don't have those same trajectories. And yet that is so in alignment with the priestess path that like it is that remembering, it is a lot of that like deconditioning and de-armoring and like letting go of the things that suppressed that and the into the body, the being in my body, present on the earth in deep enjoyment of the human life is still a difficult piece for me because the magic and the esoteric and the up and out has always been that safe saving place, and yet the work is so often to get deep 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 into my body, just like in service to others. A lot of the work now for me is holding back, being quiet, giving them space, allowing them to get there. Where at the beginning of my work and practice, you're in that, oh, trying to prove, trying to make sure, are they getting the experience that they, am I doing it good enough to, are you proud of me, mom? Like, how's it going? And now so
Yeah.
much of the work is like, can I allow and can I just exist in that space and hold that truth and allow, like you're saying, that flashlight, that illumination for them to come to it and through it on their own. And I think all of those are like so deeply interwoven together.
Mm.
And yet we don't, there needs to be more conversation about it. I want it to be as easy to find these conversations and as prevalent to hear these conversations as we do the religious rhetoric, so that those who will choose it, can choose it, would choose it, can choose it easier, faster, more efficiently, more gracefully, because it's more accessible. And like you were saying,
Mhm.
it grabs so easily. Like you're not interested in it for no reason. You're not asking for no reason. You're not like, your fingers don't stop on that book for no reason. Your fingers don't see the like, oh, on Spotify, I don't know why I want to listen to that, but I do want to listen to that. I don't know what that is, but I'm called to that. Like it is such an innate remembering thing.
Mm. It is. It is. It is. And I love that piece around how do we amplify? How do we amplify? Like, I think a lot about how when we're doing priestess work in this type of space, like when we're sitting on podcasts or when we're running mystery schools or when we're in sort of that element of the work, which isn't the only way priestess work exists. I say this to my priestesses all the time, like please do not do exactly what I'm doing. If you feel called to do it this way, please, like, by all means,
Yeah.
go do it this way. And like, there's some very specific things in my personal astrology that I can point to you to tell you why this is the way that I am being called to do this. But priestess work is in the tending to our bodies. It's, the therapist that is the priestess who is aware of the role of the body, and that informs their clinical work. It's
Yes.
lawyers, it's doctors, it's parents, it's all pieces of us that the priestess work can move into, because it's this embodied way of being. And I know that that word has gotten very like vibe, like very trendy, especially in like spiritual spaces. And it is a word that does have meaning. And to be embodied is to be returning again and again to the body. And one of the pieces of guidance that has been so resonant in my own practice has been the Lost Gospel of Mary Magdalene, which is one of several gospels that were not included in biblical canon, because of the centering of women, because there's all sorts of, because of
Yeah.
the acknowledgement of the romantic relationship between Jesus and Mary Magdalene. And the Gospel of Mary really encourages, and I love to look at it as this like blueprint, in the same way I look at tarot cards, in the same way I look at any other sacred text. It's like, it's not that it's like, oh, now these are the new literal rules I must follow. It's more like, oh, what beautiful blueprint and insight is this offering? And the Gospel of Mary is inviting us to be here as children of true humanity, fully human and fully divine. We are here to be in that place. And so we're moving through these different, what the Gospel of Mary calls powers of the ego, every day. In every circumstance, in every given moment, we are fluctuating through attachment and ego and fear and anger, not as weaknesses or as bad, but as a way to navigate the human experience and to understand the physiology of the body as a tool, as a resource, as a partner.
Yeah.
And so the work of the priestess is also in that returning, and it can be so hard because, like you, like I love to get lost in
Right.
fantasy books as a kid. I was a huge reader. I still am. I love to like check out of this reality. I love to spin out in my visualization meditations, right? And
Huh?
so I've had to work a lot in my own work, and somatic work is a huge part of my support for myself and my support for my priestesses, is how do we understand the wisdom of the body, because our lower chakras, our connection to the body, hold just as much intuitive wisdom as our uppers. But these ones get really influenced because we do live in a more patriarchal, and also in a world that's like, look at your phone, look at your computer, listen to this, like we're constantly feeding these parts, right? And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. It's just imbalanced.
Uh-huh.
Right? And so we get, and that's also where these like institutions are like, well, you need a gatekeeper between you and God. But
Yes.
God is in you. It's in your body.
Mhm.
It's in your
Yeah.
breath.
Before we started recording, we talked a little bit about that, the difference in what I find as a very unifying belief among priestesses, that we we exist as this sacred bridge instead of this like lock and key gatekeeping space of like the church always expressed to me that like, okay, this priest is speaking to God and then translating it to us, and then we would tell the priest thing, and then the priest would go back to God, and then we'll bring in the reconciliation, and then God would tell the priest my punishment, and then the priest would tell me my punishment, and then I would do my little punishment, and then it would all be okay, and I'd be back to the like, Sky Daddy, can I please have a pony? I did, my 5 Hail Marys, and that. And like, I think it's so important to be so clear about the fact that like the work that we are doing in these many forms is to bring you, the individual, closer to in deeper relation with, in clarity, in union, and really understand that it is deep within you and that you always have that connection point, and that we also acknowledge that in this world, in this modern day and age, there's so many things that can stand in the way, and there's so much that's been piled on you, that the support of a priestess to help you set that down and refocus and reconnect can be life changing, trajectory changing, and that it's not it is different than gatekeeping. It is different than like, I hold this key that you are incapable of utilizing to unlock yourself. Like, I am the answer, I am the gift, I am the way. It's like, no, I would love to help you navigate that with more ease, with more grace, with more joy, with more presence in the body, so that you can get to that space of deep pleasure and enjoyment, even in what we might label as difficulty. And I think that that idea that like suffering is optional, the difficulty, the hardship, the heaviness, the like the true difficulty of life is not, but like it doesn't have to be suffering. I have found such pleasure in the heaviness as well, in the like true weight of what it means to be a human in a body, to experience this fractal of God in a container that has edges, that can eat, that can make
Mm,
love, that can do all of those beautiful things. And so I constantly want to remind, especially as we are now in the modern age doing things like social media platforms and content creation and offer building and like these very, yes, I am teaching, yes, I am giving this, but constantly reminding people that, like the tarot, like these, hidden teachings, they are tools and support pieces, but that they are not the answer, the like, okay, top to bottom, left to right, like how the church taught us with the Bible of like, we go like that, and through the lived truth and helping to model and exist and be embodied in that, so that someone can go, well, yeah, there are places where I am that in and of myself. Oh yeah, that is my truth as well, and can hold my own truths. So we touched a little
mm,
bit on how multifaceted priestess work can be, and I think it can be really hard for someone to go like, okay, but what is it? Like, what does it look like? What happens in that session? And you do such a wide
mhm.
variety of priestess work. I would love to give people an opportunity to like peek behind the veil and really like in a very human way understand like what happens in a session, or what happens in a mystery school, or
Mhm.
what happens when I feel the desire to initiate. What do those things even mean for someone who's like, I'm curious and I'm watching all your stuff, but I'm not taking a step yet.
Yeah, yeah. Ugh. I mean, that phrase you just said, fractals of God in human form, is gonna stay with me for a really long time. I got like full body chills, like so, so beautiful. So I had to share
Oh,
that.
thank you.
Yeah, I love this question because it's like, I'm always like, great question. Let's like bring the esoteric into verbal form and like try to name the thing that cannot be named but can be felt. Likely you're feeling it if you're listening. It's sort of this like all of our bodies feel it differently, but I feel this like big expansion, just like if you've ever like sat in a cave somewhere, you've like sat up against like a really big oak tree or just like stared out at the vastness of the ocean, it can sometimes feel like that. And it's this recognition. And so the first thing that I say is like, you're recognizing something. It often feels like, wait, I know that. Or like, wait, something about that feels like I know it somehow.
Mhm.
So there is this element of recognition with also this feeling of like, but I didn't know it like that. Like that was when I picked up Mary Magdalene Revealed and was reading the pages. I was like, I just like that I was having this somatic response of like heat and like like actual heat in my body and chills and just like this recognition of what your body knows because our bodies carry epigenetic and physiological memory. It carries spiritual remembering from our ancestral lines, right? So you also have ancestors who are like helping guide this, well and wise priestesses and seers in your lineage that are guiding this. So again, it's like this recognition. But when we all run our mystery schools a little bit differently. So I can just tell you how mine looks. But different priests, we all have our different way in the door, right? Mine is through my master's degree in English literature. I studied African American literature specifically and like my own lineage and its connection to this. So I love the texts. I love to bring in the books like Mary Magdalene Revealed, the Magdalene manuscript, and then we'll read other things like Devotions by Mary Oliver and All About Love by Bell Hooks because they each carry Women Who Run with the Wolves. They each carry these unique memories, right? And then we engage in practices like morning pages from Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way, as a way to help clear the gunk of the mind. Because most people, if not all, in my opinion, have some kind of psychic and intuitive gifting. And part of our work in a priestess training is to help you listen to that, because most of us have created conditions around protection so that we don't recognize our intuition for what it is. We don't understand the language that our body speaks because we were raised in organized religion. We were raised in a Western patriarchal colonial society that tells us that we have to look outside of ourselves. And we were likely, whether by family or by our communities, ostracized or made to feel crazy, or made to feel like, who were we to think we had this wisdom? And
Yes.
so it becomes this like training of a muscle. We're training a muscle that is like any muscle in the body can atrophy, but can also regain strength. And so we do practices like morning pages. I do guided somatic support practices, and then we dive into like the metaphysical teachings of these different lineage guides. And the Magdalene lineages connects all the way back to like Inanna and Ishtar and Erishkigal and Enheduanna, the first named author in human history who was a priestess and a poet, and whose writing influences the works that we read to this day. I didn't know her name until I started doing priestess work. I didn't know her name until I picked up The Divine Feminine Oracle by Megan Watterson, and I had 6 years of basically Ivy League education in English literature and had never heard her name until this work. And so the sessions can look like we talk about what we're reading and what it brings up to people. The sessions can look like a somatic attunement, like, well, what's happening in the body? The sessions can look like energy work and energy healing. We sometimes do soul journeys, which, if you've ever practiced like a yoga nidra practice, it's this visualization through what the Gospel of Mary calls the eye of the heart, where we're seeing a vision not with our eyes and not with our mind, but with like something in between. It's like your imagination. Literally, it's like the power of imagination. And so then we go on these soul journeys and we receive messages and we receive guidance or gifts or healing in those spaces. And then we integrate them. And I watch as, whether through a workshop or through listening to a podcast episode or through the full mystery school experience, I watch as people's lives change, as they start having conversations they've been avoiding, as they start setting boundaries in places where they knew that, they were compromising themselves.
Yeah.
I see people leave jobs or take new jobs or move or like do all these incredible things that are not something that I can say by the end of this time you'll have finally left that asshole. Like, I can't tell you
Yeah.
that.
Yep.
But this knowing and this recognition and this reclamation of spiritual authority through somatic sovereignty and an understanding of relationship to the sovereign self, both within the body and within the spiritual realm, and also the tools that these sacred archetypes offer. I work with an archetype a lot because these are our sacred blueprints, right? And Hedowana is a big blueprint for me. I'm like, first high priestess, or first named author in human history, high priestess, brilliant, politically powerful. And like, this is ancient Mesopotamia. So I'm also going back and seeing that we're also just not pulling stuff out of our asses. Like, we're also not just like, not there's anything wrong with create your fantasy world, do whatever you want, but it's also like, this is deep ancient work. And most priestesses that I have encountered, and especially Magdalene priestesses, because those are just the ones that I see all the time. Like, these are my buddies, these are my friends. We're all really fucking smart. We all have done the school, we've done the big corporate jobs, we've done the big thing, and we're all also coming back to like this other thing that is taking all of that and is like, there is something missing. And
Yes.
we're devoting our lives to helping people find what was hidden, because when we understand what was hidden within the context, we are able to unearth what's hidden within ourselves. We're able to actually sit with the shit we're avoiding. We're able to actually do something, change something, see ourselves as a bridge, not as holier than thou, not as exerting power over, but as a continuation of a lineage that most of us look back and we're like, oh, wait, that grandmother was a seer, or that great grandmother was a seer, or that cousin of mine is, devoted to, it's like ordained as a pastor, or ordained as a nun, or, whatever that process is. They're following their own deeply spiritual call. Like, we start to see that the role of the healer, the seer, the spiritualist didn't go anywhere. We've just had to shapeshift to meet
Yes.
the moment. And so the priestess school is designed to help you exercise the muscle and know the names of the things that you recognize but you didn't have a name for before. So how
Yeah.
could you orient your life around something that you didn't know what it was called? And then you're like, "Oh wait, but I knew that. I
Yeah.
did know that. I recognized that. I always knew that." So now when I go into a church, I look at the statue of Mary, I'm like, "Oh, it was always you. You were always the one that was talking to me.
Yes.
It was always you and me."
Mm-hmm.
So, I know it's like a
Yeah.
big
Ah,
it's like a big, broad,
oh
sweeping,
my God, tears. Mm.
oh, yeah,
Oh,
I mean, it's and
so,
we all do it so differently, which is so beautiful too. Like, I sat on
mhm.
a panel last week with a bunch of Magdalene priestesses who all embody it differently. Some people really do it through sex and pleasure. Some people really do it through, like, dark blood mystery works. Like, we're all doing it in our own unique way, and you also get called to the teacher that, like, has the signature that's you're like, "Wait, that one. That's the one. That would be the temple I would have been a part of."
And that for me, I'm gonna now bring in a little bit of like the business piece because I think merging
Yeah.
being a modern priestess is very different than what it used to be. Like I say all the time, I'm like, I used to sit in my temple and you guys would like bring me a goat or bring me a bucket of grain,
Yes,
would lick my hand, you would give
yes.
me an offering and I would help out. But I lived in my temple and everything was taken care of. I didn't need to learn how to make carousels. I didn't need to figure out my point of difference in marketing. I didn't need to decide if I can leverage AI in an integrous way that can facilitate, like, I wasn't doing any of that, guys. And so, like, that piece in modern priestesshood is so important because, like, you have these truths, you have these messages, you have this, the meat and potatoes inside the self, you have these rememberings, and you so deeply desire to share them. And yet, this pathway to doing that is participating in this modern means of like, here is my digital temple, here is my social media storefront, and like how to do that. And so you are speaking very much to what I now understand to be point of difference in marketing in particular. And so I think really supporting this from this direction of like what you are called to and the teachers who speak to you and the books that stand out, and like both of us have referenced, you know what I mean, like little quotes and little like these little signposts on the way that like really have guided us in the formulation of our own style and how we put word to the wordless, which I think is something that all of us are
Mhm.
doing. And that is how you market. And I know it can be so complicated when you like follow the bro marketing or the like very social media, the very technical tactics, but like your point of difference is what you are so attracted to, is what you are so connected to, is what has
Mhm.
like deeply saturated into you. And I think that's so important to talk about and to share how each of us like kind of collects those pieces. And actually, my favorite quote from my favorite poet is about, as bees gather honey, so we collect the sweetest of all things. And in the quote, they say, build capital HIM. And when I first read it, it was like so perfect. And then we got to the hymn part. And like I shifted it for myself to her a long time ago. Like I read Letters to a Young Poet by Rilke like so long ago. It's my been my favorite book for like ever. But that one word, the him versus the her, and the moment that I
Mhm.
changed it, and I changed it so intuitively, and I crossed it out and I wrote capital HER, and like I was like, oh, that's it. The gathering of these pieces that illuminate us and expand us and feel like those deep knowings, like what you're expressing of going back into the church and looking at Mary. For me, it was the incense, the gold container of incense that they would shake, that they would walk up the aisle all the time, and like the cleansing, the clearing, the like, we're sending this
Mhm,
up to source. And like the first time I experienced
mhm,
mapacho being blown into my face in a sacred ceremony, and I was like, oh, like that I have been so deeply connected to for so long, and putting the words to and gathering, and even the development of our own somatic practices, or the sounds that I make to clear things, and really being able to, like you're saying, flex the muscle to be so sovereign that like the external judgment versus the external support can't take it away from you. And I know that's something that like each of us has to go through a lot of times, a little bit traumatically, a little bit difficultly, a little bit black sheep ostracized, pushed to the edges, hopefully not burned at the stake or stoned or, drowned in this lifetime. But it is a difficult process to get to this sovereign point where you're like, I can trust my inner knowing more than anything external, and I can be really selective with like who I let in to support and expand
mhm,
or like adjust my trajectory. So
mhm,
I want to talk even more about the collection of those pieces for you. I love that you've so clearly
mhm,
defined that like the written works are such a big piece for you, and like that lineage coming from, the first one of us to like write it down in this beautiful word to wordless way. I would love to hear a little bit more about like how each of those pieces has like developed in your practice. I'm hearing specifically around the physicality, since we've talked about how that can be a really difficult part, and I know that's a part that a lot of us add after a little bit of being on the path of like, oh, I do need to get it into my body. I do need to like move it into the body. What are some of those collection points that have really been important and transformational and alchemical for you around bringing it into the body, deepening from just like the knowing into that what would call embodied wisdom piece?
mhm, mhm, Um, I realized I had been practicing somatics my entire life. And I think we all have in a certain way, and for me, I it really hit when I was in college and I was studying dance as a minor. I hadn't planned to pursue dance when I was in college. I had like I know I mentioned we moved around a lot, and I had gone from like my favorite studio in school to like a studio that really was just like old school, and like,
Ugh, yeah.
my body has never been a traditional ballerina's body. I've got, like, way too much ass for that. So, like, even at 17,
Yeah.
I was like, "This is not, like, my genetics are not for this, like, I take me to Alvin Ailey, like, that is where I belong," like, but the traditional, very old school, like, white lady, nasty, right? So, I thought I was done with dance, and I thought I was done with movement, and then I went to college, and I found my way into these movement classes that I now understand were they never said it to us this way, but it was a style of modern dance that was incredibly somatic, and we would spend all this time, like, playing in the, like, intersection of how our bodies used to move as children and how they move now, and we were creating art in a way that wasn't about the performance, it was about, like, the felt story that we were trying to create, and it was this deep study and really intimate. There was a very small program. There were only like 8 or so dance minors, but our professor, I think she's still there. I was at University of Virginia, so shout out to Dr. Kim Brooks Mata. Like, she was and is when I think about the person who taught me, I'm, like, getting a little bit emotional thinking about it,
Yeah.
like, she was the one who helped me in a way that I still 10 years later, more than 10 years later, am just beginning to understand the foundation that she laid for me, because that was also at the time in my life when I was going through the most trauma. I was, like, in a very abusive relationship. I was dealing with a lot of, like, physical and sexual abuse. Like, I was in a really, really terrible time in my life, and this priestess this brilliant artist was there as this teacher, this professor in this very, organized environment, but that was working so hard to get us to create from within, to take us out of the performing archetype we had all been pushed into as dancers growing up. And so that was the first touch point. And then I was a stranger to my body for a long time after that. Like after I left and I moved to New York City, I worked, I disassociated, I had a great time. I was in school studying literature. I wanted to be a professor. So I was in my books all the time. I wasn't dancing, I wasn't moving. I was a stranger to my body for those years. And then at the beginning of COVID, I moved home to Virginia for 2 weeks. I've been here now for 6 years. And that began my return, my true return and descent. And I had to sit in my childhood bedroom for years
Wow.
and sit in my relationship with my
Wow.
parents and sit with starting my whole life over. I did a yoga teacher certification, and that is always a practice. It is like the two come to for me
Yeah.
in union. It's yoga and priestess work. And so yeah, it was just this these are my touch points because that was when my healing began, and then that was also when I started to bring in the Magdalene and an understanding of how the visual journey of the soul has to then be integrated in and through the body. And so it was me and my priestess trainings doing these crazy soul journeys and having these like wild psychic experiences. And then it was me going for a walk every single day on the same path and just like one step, one step, one step, one step. It was starting to dance again and finding a studio and friends that like helped me move in the way my body wanted to, not because I needed to be a priestess for the world, but because that was always how I understood my body and how to connect to my body. And like those are like my best friends in the whole world. And so it for me, those touch points came with that. And then within my work, I started finding people who were teaching on somatic trauma resolution and all these different ways of understanding wisdom of the body through our work. But that was, my touch points were very much, it took me, it was, I know my teachers were telling me that I needed to bring the two together, but for
Yes.
my journey, I really had to figure that piece out myself. And that was through healing of some pretty intense trauma and sitting with some really intense trauma that was outside of the priestess realm that I was sitting with like professional clinicians and working through, right? Like to be in my body. And I think I also just want to normalize that for people to be in the body can feel like a threat, to be in the body can feel unsafe because our body does so much good work to keep us safe. And so I had that was so my touch points were very and now, but that's been like those were also my initiations. So I think we talk about initiation, people think like, "Oh, you're like naked in the water and you get water poured over your head and you're like moaning and singing and in ecstasy," and like, fuck yeah, we do those
Yeah.
types of initiations.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
is also sobbing on the floor of your childhood bedroom, realizing you can't keep running away from the things that you've been avoiding for the past like 5 years of your life, that you have to like let yourself live it and breathe it and be through it and ask for help around it. Um, so yeah, so I will not ever, it was not easy for me. Uh, It wasn't easy for me. It still isn't. I still am sometimes like, damn it, this is the one I picked. I'm not a floating above the sky one. I
Yes.
picked the priestess of like, your body is holy, fully human, fully divine. I'm like, great,
Mhm.
cool. I
Yeah.
gotta like be in this human experience. Awesome. Which is in some ways is amazing. And sometimes I'm like, damn it, really? I just want to float. I just want to be in Fantasyland, please.
Agreed. Like when you you realize that you're like, I've been saying this quote, like you can only meet another as deeply as you've met yourself. And every time I'm in the like deepest, darkest depths, and I'm like annoyed. Like I'm annoyed that I'm having to do this again. I'm annoyed that like I thought that was rock bottom. I thought that was learning how to lose it
Yep.
all and make it again. I thought that was like how many different lives we've each lived to be able to get to this point. And yet you do have those moments where you're like, can I just be the girl with the flat brim hat with the feather in it who's like going to Burning Man all the time, and not the like snotty, cryy on the floor, lose it all, let go, build all your dreams, watch them crumble to the ground. To be able to hold another in that, for me, the piece that I've been working on the last few years is getting up to that compassion state, existing outside,
Mhm.
beyond the empathy and the sympathy, beyond the point of like, oh, let me change this for you. Oh, let me fix this for you. Oh, let me like make this a little bit easier for you. Like desiring to like move the pain out of someone or help them move it faster or solve it and just hold. And it's like the holding of my own has flexed that muscle so much so that I can hold someone else as they allow themselves to face and hold. And it's that actually alchemizes and
Mm,
transmutes versus at the beginning of my work, there was a lot of energy healing that I did that was like doing for. And the
yes.
true finding of my own point of difference again is that, like, a lot of my magic is deeply rooted in this consent based work where, like, I am supporting and facilitating and helping, but, like, I am actually asking in many dimensions for you to consent to participate, for you to activate, for you to be right there with me doing it. And a lot of times now I'm modeling it so that the individual can
Mhm.
do that for them and can take that sovereign ownership. And how much harder that is to love and trust your client so much that I'm going to stay right here and I'm going to see you in pain and agony and I'm going to listen to the noises that come out and I'm going to witness the magnitude of the things that you're moving through and the things that you have been through. And I'm going to go, I trust and I trust that it is not for me to change, that is just for me to be here
Mhm.
with you, holding, embodying, and believing in you and correctly perceiving you so truthfully that it allows the
Mhm.
space for you to get to that place yourself in your own sacred remember.
Yeah. Oof. It's so much its own devotional practice.
Mhm.
And I do think to your point of difference, like I've worked as a medium, I've worked as specifically an energy healer, I've worked as a tarot reader, and these all are such important pieces of work. And every time I was in one of those singularly, I was always like, I'm so tired. Like, I don't know if this is like, I don't know how people do this all the time, right? Like, and then I stepped into a realization that my work is the priestess work, which is it's different.
Yes.
And it is that, oh, I'm actually just here to, like, as the guardian of your unconscious. I am here to witness, to bring it up, to sit with. And also, I cannot take it on. Also,
Yes.
I cannot steal your healing from you. Also, I cannot steward something for you. My work is to be in it with you
Yes.
and also be in my own work so that I
Hmm.
don't bulk at your darkness because I'm like, yeah, girl, I was there with my shit yesterday. I see you, I'm with you. And I felt even Lindsay, as you were describing that, like I felt like I was transported into that moment of when you're holding that with someone and you're just like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm not going anywhere.
Hmm.
And I can't do this.
Yes. Yes.
I
I
can't do it
express
for you.
my work so often as birthing partner, doula, and midwife, where I'm like, I
Yeah.
have flux between those different pieces, but no matter which of these roles, which of these archetypes I'm standing in with you, nobody but you can birth that baby. Like nobody but you can birth that baby. And so like I can, like a birthing partner, be doing counter pressure and be modeling the breath and be sitting behind you and holding. I can act as the doula and focus on you as, you know what I mean? The baby is focused on over here, but really be present for you. I can act as the midwife, the like ideally I'm not doing anything. I'm just overseeing, I'm reminding, and yet it is that the holding of space, the seeing, the supporting in such a different way. I really resonate with what you're saying around the tarot card reader and the medium. I've felt oracle for myself. I started in spiritual wellness coaching, intuitive business coaching, mindset coaching, energy healing, divination practices. And exactly as you're saying, this like, okay, I'm doing only one thing. I'm doing only one. It's not the fullness of it, and so it was exhausting in a lot of ways to limit the self. That's really how I felt when I got my Reiki attunement too, where I was like trying to just use Reiki, and I'm like, this feels so confining. Like it was so helpful to start my energy healing trajectory in that way, to have very similar to like a therapy of like, I need the letters, I need the technicality, I need the attunement. I feel like that
Yes.
call to like the structure of something. And then once I was in it, I was like going to culinary school. You're like, okay, I'm never gonna brunoise again. I'm never gonna make this sauce. I'm never gonna cut these little onions in this little size and shape ever again. But like I'm glad I learned so that now I can like do it completely differently. And I think
Mhm.
there's an important piece to share with other people. If you are picking up the tools, picking up the titles, if you went through the like, I'm going to change my Instagram bio every like week and a half with like what it is to try and get closer to what am I even saying? What am I even offering to you? Like, what am I selling? And then the like dealing with the selling of this. I think that's a piece that we should get into too, because we are now selling this work and making money from this work. And especially being a part of the Magdalene lineage, that is such a big piece of it. The rewiring, the attuning to what it means to be a wealthy spiritual teacher. And like that is, for the majority of us, not an easy thing because we are called to that. And it is such a massive undertaking that we move through and initiate through so that we can support the collective in that. And I deeply believe that that is one of the biggest pieces, that why so many priestesses are popping up right here and right now, is that that is how we change the world. This supporting the direct connection for the individual with that higher power, with the goddess, with the one, with the truth, and also bringing wealth back into this work, and like allowing us to
Mhm.
elevate and have all of this resource, because what we do with the resource and who we help and then how resource helps them is how we change the world, the coming internally to
Mhm.
change the entire system and structure, versus the like how we were taught to think about change being so external, of like, okay, go into
Mhm.
lawmaking, go into the like, how do we change the structure out here? And the answer on this path is the internal self. How do I, and then how does that ripple effect, and how do I support others in the doing of that as well?
Mhm.
Mm,
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, it that this is like I is a har has been a really big challenge for me. Being paid for this work at all has been a big challenge for me. And I am slowly and surely getting myself out of a martyr
yes.
badge that I
Yep.
would call, holding a torch potentially, as it were, and was really ready to just like sacrifice my well-being
Hmm.
for my work for the collective.
Yes.
And am also have regularly been met graciously by mentors that are like, "Well, who asked you to do that? Nobody asked you to do that. No, we don't need you martyred. We need you here. We need you
Huh?
teaching. We need you in your work. We need you resourced. We need you provided for." And back to, Lizzie, what you were saying earlier, like in a different world, we wouldn't have to ask because we would be the healer in the village or the seer, or we would be at the temple and we would be
Yes.
provided for,
Yes.
right? And so we're also navigating a world under capitalism and colonialism that's asking us to reorient to what it means to have money and what it means to earn or receive money in ways outside of a capitalistic structure, and in ways that like return us to commerce and understanding that the exchange of one good for another is older, much older than capitalism, while also living under late stage capitalism, while also wanting to like help support people as they're navigating the identity crisis and the despair and all these pieces, while also wanting to make sure that like we're not burning out
Mhm.
for our work, because I spent several years very burnt out and very under resourced and living with my parents because I was like, well, this is all I could charge. Like, I can't charge more than this.
Mhm. And I think
And
that's a piece that I think so many of us get to, of like, we start in the space of like, "Oh, I can't charge it. It's wrong to charge for spiritual work." Like, that's so put on
yep.
you. And I have never met a priestess that doesn't have the core, I want to help others, I want to support others, I want to give to others. And so it's like this perfect storm in our patriarchal capitalistic society to like keep us in that small space. And you get to this point where you realize the only way I can truly give this gift and do this work is for me to be taken care of. And like, I need to take
Mhm.
care of me now, and like taking care of my body, taking care of my mind, having the space to do the practices, to flex the muscle over and over, to
Yeah.
clearly label and identify and line up my own shit so that when I'm in a session and service and when I'm holding someone else, when my shit creeps in, I know. And I'm like, no, 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 you're over here. We'll work on you. And it doesn't
Yeah.
permeate into a session. But all of that is work, and it does take resource, especially in this world and in this reality. And like, you get to
Mm.
this place where you have to choose. You're like, okay, if I continue down this martyr path, like I won't be able to do this. And at some point I will have to like
Mhm.
give this up. And then you recognize once again, but like it's not just my title, it's not just what I do, it's who I am. So like I can't, which means I have to do all of the work to get to the point of being able to charge and being able to stand in that and to withstand the projections. I'm not sure about you, but I could take a guess that you've experienced the projections of like, who are you to do that? And like, who are you to think that like you can be, especially as a female, as a spiritual teacher who is a female, to say these things, to claim these things. I'm sure you have also been called names and commented on and judged and torn down and all of those pieces.
Oh, yeah. Especially talking about Mary Magdalene, like, I remember the first time, and really the only time so far that I've gone, like, mega, mega, mega viral on TikTok. Like, millions of views, hundreds of thousands of comments, got to, like, a scary side of TikTok. I was talking about the lost gospel of Mary Magdalene, and I had just, like, gotten in a fight with an ex-girlfriend. And I was like, "Fuck it." And it was like a fiery moon. I can't remember. It was like the dead of winter. So it was probably like the full moon, and I don't remember. But I remember seeing astrologers be like, "Hey, be careful what you say right now." And I was like, "I don't give a fuck." And I'm just like, I didn't even say anything crazy. I was
Yeah.
just like, "Listen, this is the lost gospel. It says there's no such thing as sin." Duh, 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 duh. And when I tell you it
Oh yeah.
imploded, it imploded.
Yep.
And my nervous system was wrecked. Yeah, and I mean, I this like, and especially as like a Black woman and as a Latina woman who's like talking about these things, you get all these call-ins to like the white theologians and like, what do the
Hmm.
white men have to say about what you're saying, and what, like, you need to go get an education. I'm like, I have one, guys, and
Right.
I landed here. And even
Yeah.
if I didn't, I would still land here because the Ivy Tower does not like just decide what is true and alive and real. But anyways, that's a whole other
Yes.
rant. But like,
Right.
and so like, I'm gonna get called a heretic no matter what. And actually, heretic I like. I take it as fuel.
Yeah.
I've since also learned to take, and I'm very Scorpio, so I'm like, okay, yeah, feed it to me. Like, engagement is engagement. Feed it to me. I'll alchemize it,
Right.
and it does impact. Like, it does sting. It does have an effect. I contracted a ton after that one video happened, and I would like went through a bit of an existential crisis. I was like, should I even be like, why am I even doing this? Like, and then at the same time, I had, like, literally, like, my following went up by thousands, and people were like, "Tell me more," and I was like, "I
Yeah.
don't have the infrastructure for this." Like, it was,
Right.
like, very I'm, like, not ready for this, and so it's also been this, like, dance of, well, if I'm gonna be projected on, and, like, this will also happen, I imagine, Lindsay, this has happened for you in, like, interpersonal relationships as well. Because those of us with, like,
Oh,
strong
yeah.
presences and deep spiritual gifting, like, you start to also be able to discern which of your friendships are, like, true friendships and which of your friendships are people projecting things onto you or people who can't sit in and with you. This happens to me a
Yeah.
lot, has happened, I'm changing the story, but has happened to me a lot in romantic relationships, and I've just realized that it's gonna happen anyways. I may as well do it the way that I wanna do it, and I may as well be able to, like, speak and orient to who I'm talking to, because for all of those comments and all of that shitty stuff, the relationships that I've made and the people who I have seen change their lives through this work and the healing that I have accessed is so beautiful and so worth it, and so I think when it comes to the resourcing and the money piece of this, I'm also very aware that, like, the more I'm able to be in alignment with what I'm charging for something like a mystery school or, like, one-on-one work, the more capacity I have to create,
Yes.
like, things at different entry point levels. So I
For the
now
collective.
have this
Yes.
wide breadth from, like, this vast array of free resources to, like, an $11 ebook to a $22 private podcast to, like, the $5,000 for the mystery school and then like, the $1,000 a month for one-to-one work, right? Like, all of those things feed together so that I can meet people wherever they might be on their journey because I've been in the place where I didn't even have the $11, right? And so so it's also like I can empathize and understand and want to create for that, but I can't create for that if I'm also in a place where I'm in scarcity and I am not allowing myself to receive what this work. Just because society devalues this work, it doesn't mean it doesn't have value. Just
Yes.
because this is women's work and queer folks' work and indigenous work and ancient work makes it invaluable.
Yes.
And we are also the steward of the work. So, also for me, the more I lean into being the steward of something and understand that I'm here for it to pass through, money passes through, just like love passes through, just like a message passes through. I receive it, I return it, I receive it, I return it, I receive it, I return it. It becomes less about Olivia who, eats a pint of ice cream before bed and cries at long movies and has a temper tantrum about X, Y, and Z and is still really mad at her ex-boyfriend. Like all of that, that Olivia gets to exist and Priestess Olivia
Yes.
gets to exist. And somewhere in between those two is the bridge that the work moves through, but it's not about me and it's not just me.
Yes.
And that also and it's also uniquely me.
Mhm.
And if people are called to me, then I also have a responsibility, I believe, to fucking show up and to not be subconsciously resenting them because I think that I'm not making enough money right now and how am I going to buy my dinner? That's
Yes.
not working either. Nobody that's not a win-win. Nobody's winning in that scenario because their subconscious can pick up on my subconscious. And then even if we're having a great interpersonal moment, it's
Yes.
still in the field.
Yes.
It's still
That's
in the field. And that took time to come to, you know?
It's exactly how I teach pricing, where I'm like, I have really sat with pricing in such a way where, like, I don't want to get to, you know, 5 out of 10 calls, 10 out of 12 calls, like, part of the way through and feel as if I've already given what I've been given and now I'm like giving at a deficit. And like that's always how I've done pricing. I'm like,
Mhm.
if they were to utilize everything that is offered in this offering container, one-on-one, whatever it is, they were to utilize all of it, what is the price point I would have to charge to be able to give at 100%, 110% the entire time and finish still in that vibration, not finish at like, oh, I'm like 75%ing it or 25%ing it or like having to like force myself to like give what I deeply love to give. I had to find the way to like access that sacred reciprocity and to feel
Mm.
into being in such a position where I am doing this not just for my own self, not just for my own nucleus, not for my just my own family and like this internal, but when I charge in that alignment, it is modeling it for other women, other queer individuals, other indigenous people, others of us who are doing any facet of this type of work and showing them, modeling for them that like this is how we change the value system in general, is that those of us who are up at that place where we can confidently offer this value, we are the lighthouses for others. And like you get up a little bit further and you get up a little bit further and you get until you find your space. And then you have to like continuously face it and allow it to be that in integrity, not just what the industry says or what the standard is or what other people
Mhm.
are doing, but like how do I show up and give my 100% and not get to this point where I am resentful, where my subconscious is
Mhm.
projecting any of that into this sacred container that is also part of my work.
Mm. Yeah. Be the lighthouse. I love that.
Before we close, I have to touch on the queerness as being a queer priestess as well. I think once again, from a tiny little amount of us, it's an even smaller amount of us, and it's something that like there's just multiple whammies, especially coming from the Catholic Church of like I remember being like 6 or 7 and my grandma telling me I was going to hell for the plethora of reasons that I was already expressing. I mean, I've identified as poly from a very young age. I've identified as
Mm.
queer from a very young age. I've identified as a witch from a very young age. And all three of those, the church was like, no, no, sweetie, that's bad. That's wrong. We need to like forcibly strip each of these pieces from you. And like my little tiny hands were just like death gripped on them of like, no, these are like such beautiful foundational pieces. So I'd love to hear a little bit about the queer aspect of the journey and how that does complicate and change and like adds this additional climbing layer that you have to move through.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it absolutely does. And I also always love to like say that everything I learned about witchcraft, I learned from the Catholic Church. And so whenever they're like witch, I'm like holding up
You
a
get
mirror. I'm like, guys, come on. Come on. Let everything I know about veneration and
right.
witchcraft, I learned from you guys. Like, come
Yeah.
on.
What are you burning? What are you
Right?
knifing? What are you blood and bodying? Come on.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, how do we
Yeah.
decide when Easter is? Oh, after the first full moon, after the spring equinox.
Cute.
That's not witchy at all. What
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so for me, my queerness really actually came into clarity as I got closer to my priestess work and what I now understand was my priestess work, but there was this period of time when I was in my early like spiritual awakening stage, as I would call when I was like Gabby Bernstein, Marianne
Yeah.
Williamson, like all those people. I just remember saying to one of my friends at the time, I was like, I don't know, but the closer I get to what God actually is, the gayer I get. I was like, the closer, like these two things happened in such close proximity. And for me, I had my first real relationship was really abusive. And I know I mentioned that earlier. So I didn't really understand what desire was even because I was in this state of like PTSD and like interpersonal, just like all these different things that I didn't understand wasn't love. I didn't understand that that wasn't you just like help and figure it out and whatever. And, so by the time I got to graduate school in New York, I was sitting in these feelings that I was sort of going like, "Is that what that is?" Like, kissing
Mm.
one of my friends at, like, Stonewall. I mean, it was, like, the most, like, type, like, the most stereotypical queer shit. I'm, like, in grad school at New York University, making out with my friend at Stonewall, like, I'm just, like, having the most, like but I just was like, "Oh, is that what this is?" And so similar to reading the Gospel of Mary Magdalene and putting a name to something I had felt my whole life, for me, that was also my experience of queerness was,
Yeah.
oh, this has been here the whole entire time. I just didn't know that that's what it was. I just didn't know that that could be what it was. I do think it was confronting for some people in my life because I had never, like, as a teenager, but it's not even true because I look back on some of my friendships in high school and me and those friends have been like, yeah, we were super in love with each other. That was like super sapphic. Like we were so obsessed with each other, but we
Yeah.
didn't understand it as that, or at least I didn't. And we all in our, like, mid to late 20s came out and were like, "Holy shit, I was, like,
Uh,
so in love with you." But
yeah. So beautiful. Yeah.
that I didn't understand that as love. I didn't understand that as romantic. I just thought that, everyone would have these, like, super tender romantic sleepovers with their best friends where you wouldn't do anything except cuddle with each other and then cry when you weren't gonna see each other for a week or, like, romantically ask each other to prom, and these things can totally happen in platonic friendships, just to be
Yeah.
super clear, but in my experience and with my friendships, we were all like, "Hey, we were gay." That's what
Yep.
that was.
Yep.
And so it has been this, but what I also did always have was this strong conviction that there was nothing to be ashamed of, that queerness and my friends who were gay that were out, and I was always fiercely fiercely protective of them. Fiercely like, no one can tell you who you love. Like I was just such a I don't even know when I knew that. Like I just feel like I'm sure it's an imprint from my parents, but I just was like, like I just remember several times going off on these rants, and then a few years later I was like, maybe hit a little close to home. Um, so for me, it has been this really paired piece, and it also has offered me. I do find sometimes in Magdalene circles, especially, I there can be this hyperfixation on the, like, divine union and on Jesus and Mary Magdalene as partners and all this, like, I'm super for. I definitely believe and see very clearly that they were soul partners. I mean, I get called a heretic all the time for
Yep.
talking about that,
Yep.
and I think that sometimes it can lend itself to this, like any energy can be misconstrued or warped, and I think I have been grateful for the queerness in my perspective because it has kept me discerning when people get overly like, oh, well, now we must become submissive, or now we need our divine counterpart in order for our spiritual work to exist. Like, it has led me to be like, yeah, but also the
No.
temp like
Yeah.
we were doing like sex rites and sex magic, and like that's very different than, "Oh, I'm in this, like, specific type of relationship where I'm asked to once again surrender my power to a
Yes.
male figure," as opposed to being in real true partnership with that person or doing, whatever the fuck we want. Like,
Yeah.
there's so much in the priestess history of, like, Gamos and sex rituals that the men would just come and the priestesses would provide these sex rites, and then they would go away. Like, it wasn't like it was just a very different world, and I think that imprint lives in us as well. So I am grateful also for the perspective that that has allowed me to sit in. Absolutely, I'm all for a divine union counterpart. I believe some people really are meant to have that dynamic in their lives, and I also don't think that that's the only way that's true. And so I'm not interested in like presupposing that onto a legitimate priestess walk is like, oh well, now you must also have this like twin flame situation with someone of the opposite gender in
Yes.
order for your priestess to be, like, valid. So that has been a nice. I've been, like, really grateful. It's like, "Well, there's no way I'm falling down that rabbit hole." Like,
Yep.
that was never
Yep.
gonna happen for
Yep.
me.
There will be no ballerina farming on this trajectory because
There will not.
the queerness, like it for me, it was a lot with sex magic in particular because it is so
Mhm.
often solely described as male and female, not just masculine and feminine, but like body parts and actions and specific protocols, and being someone who has literally from I mean, I remember getting married in front of my stuffed animals with a guy on one arm and a girl on the other. And my mom was like, "What are you doing, sweetie?" I was like, "I'm getting
Ah,
married. I'm getting married." And she's like, "To who?" And I'm like, "To Eric and Katie." And she's like, "You can't." And I'm like, "What do you mean? What do you mean I can't?" And she's like, "Well, first off,
I love
one,
that.
and second off, Katie's a girl." And I was like, No, I'm pretty confident in my choices here, mommy. I want this one and I want this one. I want one of each. I want like my understanding has always been so different around it. And then finding this like truth in my spiritual awakening and my calling, and then getting to these texts and protocols and this work that I knew was so much for me, and then seeing it being described as only in this way, with this way, and this way. And I was just like, okay, we're gonna have to like really unpack that, and that ability to not get sucked into just another form of this is how you're supposed to. There's always been so much discernment, and I've had to do so much reconciliation
Mhm.
with like the difference between what was given and then how I received that. And like it started from the Bible. I remember that so clearly, having so many questions. I got kicked out of family life and religion class all the fucking time because they were just like, we need you to
Mhm.
not, like, we need you to not have a comment on everything. We need you to not have a question on everything. We need you to not like disprove something or show how this is changed or like put the pieces together. And I'm like, but I have questions. And I do put these pieces, and it like it doesn't make sense. It's not making sense. And so like I need more there. And my queerness has also been such a big, profound piece of like how to get to this sovereign state, because there's something so truthful and so right and so aligned and so divine and sacred about my understanding of like the non-binary and gender fluid and two-spirited and the queer connection, and my like my divine relationship with my feminine partners versus my non-binary partners versus my previous male part, and like all of these pieces, and how uniquely a part of the practice each one of those practices were, and how important they have been, and how many doors they have opened. And that like profound inner knowing of like there's no text, there's no teacher, there's no other priest who's going to tell me that like that's not it, and that that's wrong, and that that's bad, and
Mhm.
that the goddess who shines her light down on me all the time is going to be like, I'm really happy about all of this, but I'm not happy about this. I'm like, I just can't, no part of me accepts that. And so I did have to go on a lot of seeking to get the support that I needed in those other spaces to be able to talk about it and to be so open about it, and to once
Mhm.
again
Mhm.
stand in that position of the lighthouse and be like, queer does not mean you can't be a spiritual teacher, and woman does not mean that you can't be a spiritual teacher, and this not being born of a practicing witch does not mean that you can't do this work, and like all of these different reclamation pieces. So I love being able to have that conversation with another who's traveled their own version of that.
Yeah. Oh, I thank you so much for sharing all of that. I really resonate with that piece of like your non-binary partner is teaching you one thing and your cis male partner is teaching you one thing and like your female partner is teaching you something else, because like I can think of different experiences with all of the different partners that I've had where I
Yeah.
have felt God, where I
Yeah.
have felt love, and I have felt a different texture of love, but a love that's no less true with each of these partners, and have gotten closer to what this, this gnosis, this knowing of God through lived experience that has been so profoundly life changing and affirming and clear. And I think when we talk about how do we sell, how do we stand in our knowing, it's also those experiences as a queer woman for me that have just allowed me to be like, I just know this, and I know it from all these different fractaled ways of seeing it, and I understand it can have a different texture, and it can mean something different or be in a different language or whatever, but I know that this is the one that's mine,
Yes.
and for whatever reason, whatever soul contracts I signed that seemed pretty ironclad, because a while ago I was trying to get a normal job again and it was like not happening.
No.
Whatever ironclad soul
Yes.
contracts I signed also came with these incredible gifts of being able to live at a time and in a space where I could express and explore and be given the beautiful gifts of love in all of its forms, whether romantically, platonically, or the love that we share with like our soulmate clients and the people who
Yes.
like get this space, or the love that we share on a podcast like this, where you can be like, oh, thank God somebody else gets it. Like somebody else in their own way gets and sees this too. Like that can be so healing. And so that's also to where I find queerness is this like broad stroke,
Yeah.
which I know I did not invent
Cultural
queerness
queerness.
as that, but that's always
Yeah.
I've always identified, I think it was Bell Hooks, who was like a great queer quote unqueer queerness that I can't fully remember right now, but it's about that. It's like a way of living, a way of seeing the world, and a way of seeing all of our things and all of our work. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I say I'm culturally queer in addition to, like, my sexual identity being queer, of just,
Yes.
like,
Yes.
rewriting this commitment of I'm not just going to take what the world has given me, whether that's in relationship, whether that's in communication, whether that's in, the commitments that we make to each other. I think queerness has been such a beautiful place, a fertilizer to grow the sovereignty, because it does offer you the offer and does oftentimes demand that you create, co-create, and like consciously face and choose, not just like take the factory standard, which has been a
Yeah.
foundational piece in not just my professional trajectory, but like my entire life.
Yeah. Mm,
Mm.
I feel that
What a
too so
beautiful
deeply.
conversation. Thank you so
I
much.
know.
Oh,
Thank
I
you.
like I could do this for many, many, many more hours, but I want to give you the
I
opportunity.
know, me too. Like we could just stay all day.
I would love to give you the opportunity to spotlight anything that you have that people can take a look at. Obviously, I'd love for you to drop all of your social media. We'll have everything in the show notes, but tell people how they can go deeper with you, how they can find more work from you, especially because you've given us such a broad range of, especially price points for entry points for this type of work. So somebody's curiosity has a funnel, a pathway in at so many different levels. And
Yes, yes. So, I have a couple different things. Mainly, I have a public podcast. It's called The Walk of the Magdalene, and that's where I go and I kind of riff on all the things, and I also bring like any big offers or any big things that are happening. I talk about them there. I have an ebook. It's the Walk of the Magdalene ebook. And then I'm also right now I've recently reopened my one-on-one practice. And it's called the Living Temple, and it's a Magdalene priestess ordination for established mystics, priestesses, and healers who are really feeling called to layer the Mary Magdalene element into their work. So they may have ordained through a different priestess school, or they may be self-ordained, or they may be therapists or healers and
yeah,
of other modalities that just really want to do a personalized deep dive and ordination through the specific work of the Magdalene. And then later this year, I'll reopen my mystery school, so that I'll be sharing all about that later this year. But those are my main touch points right now.
ugh, thank you so much, guys. If you want to check any of those out, please jump into the show notes. I'll have all the jumps for the social media as well as each of the offers that we talked about. Thank you so much, Olivia, for being here. I had such a
Thank
wonderful time.
you.
I'm so excited to continue and stay connected. And thank you for giving your work to the world. It is so inspiring to get to open my social media storefront and to see content like yours. It's a joy to be able to consume in such an intentional way. And I love every time that I tap into one of my social media channels and get to see one of your pieces.
Oh, thank you. That's so kind of you to say. And also I will have your face in mind when I'm like, is somebody gonna be mad at me for posting this? I'll be like, Lindsay will be happy
We'll
that
be
I'm
happy.
posting it. So I'm gonna
Just
post it
think of
anyways.
me. Then we'll put this kicked up, like all
I'll post it
excited to see
anyways.
your mm. Thank you, thank you, thank
And
you.
thank you so much for this space and for this beautiful conversation and for your work as well. It's so heartwarming. So thank you.